guys, welcome back to Magic TV. My name's Craig. It is 9 o'clock, which means it's time for a Talk Magic. And today I am going to be interviewing somebody who you will never have heard of. It's very likely that you don't know who this person is, but I'm telling you, you are aware of their work. They have been very instrumental behind the scenes with a lot of releases that you've probably heard of. This is an incredibly successful person that's been in Magic for a long time, but also has another aspect to their career as well, which I'm hoping to talk about with them. And 2023 is going to be their year, because now they're actually moving out of the shadows, so to speak, and rather than being the person behind a lot of the big releases, they're going to be coming forward, and you're going to be seeing their name on a lot of products moving forward. A genius. I've got to know this person quite well over the last 6 months, and I can confidently tell you that this person is a genius. I am, of course, talking about the one and only Drew Perry. How you doing, Drew? You all right, man?
I'm very well and very flattered.
It's true. People are not going to know who you are. I know people are going to be like,
sure.
Yeah. But you've done more outside of Magic than most magicians have ever done inside of Magic. And you've done a heck of a lot inside of Magic as well. And, you know, every time I sit down with you and chat with you over Zoom, it's like a 2-hour conversation before we even get to the point, because you're just going, hey, I've had this idea, I've had this idea, I've had this idea. And by the way, I'm working on this and this and this and this and this. And that's just the stuff that's within Magic, and doesn't even take into consideration what else you do. I mean, wow. 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 People say I do a lot. I get tired just speaking to you and listening to half of the stuff that you get on with.
Yeah, I don't know how to switch my brain off. That's the problem. I'm terrible at relaxing.
Please don't. It's good for the community. But I want to talk about you as a performer, because I've seen you perform. You're a great performer. For anyone who's watched my 5x5, I actually said on record that I think that you do Charming Chinese Challenge better than almost everybody, including Troy. But outside of being a performer, outside of being involved in Magic, there's this whole other industry that you've made a huge name for. So it's kind of, how do we start this interview? Because normally I'd ask people how they get into Magic, which I'm going to ask. I'm going to ask your origin story, but I'd also like to know that what I'm alluding to, by the way, for everybody who's watching this interview, you are a prop builder for TV, film, Hollywood. You not just build the props, but you consult on a lot of the shows and a lot of the that they have an idea. You get bought in to make that idea a reality, and you will have, you know, without, you know, Game of Thrones and all these different films and everything. We'll talk all about that. And so you've got you're very respected in that industry. And this whole thing that you do with that industry runs parallel with what you do with Magic, but then they cross over, because what you do within the prop building industry kind of helps with what you do in Magic as well. So there's a lot to unpack here, is the point I'm trying to make.
There is. They completely run parallel, because actually, really what I'm known for is an approach. I have a strategy and approach to solving problems. And that's really what anyone comes to me, whether that's Peter at Alakazam or it's a film premiere, they've come to me with a problem that they don't know how to solve. And the approach to solving that problem is what makes me good at it, not knowing a certain thing or knowing how to paint something or do carpentry. Is the approach. And actually the approach is what's made me good at both things. That's where, and that's something I've particularly worked on, is trying to figure out and really think deeply about how you solve problems and how you creatively solve problems. And that fundamentally is what Magic is. Like, when you're doing a trick, you're presenting a thing, but the problem is how you make that happen, how you make that coin appear in that box or whatever. That's a problem to solve. And that solution, in my day-to-day work with my team, we call it solutioneering, which is a word that's horrible, but it is kind of that thing of solution, finding a solution, and engineering at its purest, of finding out that solution that will work within the constraints that you have. You know, in Magic, it's okay, you're going to use sleight of hand, or are you going to use a gimmick? Is that an off-the-shelf gimmick? Is it just going to be a shell? Do you need to make a custom shell? Or is the other thing gimmicked? Or are you just going to rely on sleight of hand? And where's the compromise? You know, any magic trick has a compromise somewhere for it to be possible. And it's minimizing that compromise and deciding where you want it to be. But weighing all of that up, I have this quite strict strategy and approach on that and that's what's got my reputation to where it is, I think.
Wow. and I want to get into the, so when did you start being interested in prop building and magic? Was it something that happened at the same time, or did one lead to the other?
It was around the same time, and it was quite young. So probably around 12, 13 is when I started taking both quite seriously. To the point that by the time I was 15 or 16, I had props that I built on TV.
Wow.
So I was taking both fairly seriously, fairly early on, but it came from being in a fairly unusual school that gave quite a high level of responsibility to the pupils. So when I was age 12, I was given a set of keys to the theatre, and I could let myself in or out whenever I liked. So if I wanted to go and use the workshop and build something, I could. If I wanted to go and work on a theatre production in my own time, I could just let myself in at 12 years old and crack on. If I wanted to play with the pyrotechnics, I could. You know, when I was about 14, I think, maybe 15, I made this prop that was a wizard's staff, like 7-foot long staff. And I wanted it to shoot lightning. So there would need to be a button, a little bit of basic electronics that fired some sort of mechanism that created this lightning bolt. And I asked my chemistry teacher, and he said, "Oh, you want flash string?" I was like, "What's flash string?" You know? And he put me in touch with Davenport's and said, "This is the people that you want for flash string. Go and see them, and they'll help you out." And that's when the door opened to me with professional magic, you know, not just simple things from a Marvin's Magic set or something, which I was also interested in. But I went into this place and I was blown away by the fact that this stuff could all be learned, you know. Yeah. And that was the tipping point. And I bought the flash string and I made this stuff, and I still have it in the loft. Actually, you can press the button and a lightning bolt strikes out of it, and it looks really cool. This little fan propels the piece at the end, which is just a wad of flash cotton, and it pulls the flash string behind it. And as it gets tense, it pulls a little lever that strikes it, so it pushes it out and then lights it from the bottom. And that was that moment where I discovered Davenport's, and I then discovered International Magic. You know, this is pre-Google, so literally asking around, and discovered International. That was when I really started getting into the learning of magic. Yeah, I've always been keen to learn anything. You know, if there's a constant trait, it's figuring out how and why something works. You know, I'd be taking apart stuff when I was 4 years old. So, and I grew up on a non-working farm for a period of time. So there'd be tractors and things to repair and things to tinker with. My next door neighbor had this stunning workshop. He repaired classic cars, restored classic cars. And he taught me a lot about the mechanical engineering side. My father worked on electronics. So all of that combined with access to this theatre and the prop making and theatre production, and the fundamental desire to really find a way of tell stories in an interesting and different way. That's what I was interested in theatre. And then I discovered this whole world of illusions and magic and this whole other sort of thing that I could learn about. And I think I was lucky. I met the right people. I was lucky enough when I was only about 14 years old to meet Bobby Bernard, and he was incredibly generous with his time, as he was to many others. I know, you know, there's a sort of a group of people around my age that he taught and helped out. You know, Christian Grace was one of his other sort of proteges and taught a lot. going to international on a Saturday, he'd sit 2 or 3 people down and really drummed that sort of requirement to learn his way and his rules, and made some really good friends early on, and that pointed me the right way and didn't just get, you know, I could have easily bought something off the shelf that did a thing, you know, a simple packet trick or two, and thought that's cool. But what he really did was open my eyes to the bigger world of the thinking behind it and the psychology behind what it's for and why I should care about the methods and so on. So I've got a lot to thank him for.
Wow. That's incredible. I didn't even know half of this about you already. So, so you're 14, 15, 16. You're. What are your goals? What are your aspirations? You've got into magic. You're hanging out at international at Davenport with Bobby Bernard, but you've also got this passion for prop building. I know you're not a professional performer, and you're not a full-time pro. You can perform, but obviously you love the other aspect of what you do.
I was never a full-time pro, but I was doing paid gigs a little bit later on, I think from about 17, 18 years old till early 20s. I was taking on some paid gigs. I was doing some restaurant work. TGI Fridays in Milton Keynes in particular was a regular haunt for me. And that was really useful. And that was something I forced myself to do, really, to get over a level of really, I'm quite introverted person normally. So it was something I forced myself to do to try and put myself out there a little bit. But that was maybe a little bit later. That was kind of after university. On the prop building side, it wasn't just props, it's everything about theatre. It was everything about putting on theatre, the lighting, the sound, everything about it. The prop building actually is something that came much in and out. It's one of those things, it all ebbs and flows. You know, I was doing some props at 16, 17 years old because there was no one else at the school that was willing to do it for the school shows, and I was. So I did bits and pieces, and I was fortunate enough to know the right people. But again, that was sort of by luck and by happenstance. You know, the right person was also in the International Magic that day, and they needed a thing. And Ron said, "Oh, you should speak to Drew. He might have the time to do it." So there was a little bit of that going on. My actual goal when I was that age was to go into theatre production, was to go on tour with a big show, you know, and I did. I worked at Milton Keynes Theatre for 6 or 7 years on and off. And I had the pleasure of working on some incredible shows. It's a touring venue. So for those that don't follow the theatre industry too much, the big shows come in and out of Milton Keynes Theatre every week. So I was seeing different props, different sets, different technology, different lighting designs, working with different directors and understanding their approach and how they do things and how they pull a show together. You know, I had the pleasure of sitting next to someone like Matthew Bourne directing a ballet as a 20-year-old kid.
Wow. And
that's had a huge influence on my concept of theatre and storytelling, is that there's so many influences coming there. And on the technology side, at the end of the day, I like the technology side almost more. And the props I'm known for are props that do a thing because there's some technology in there. You know, whether that's the eye that goes above the door in Big Brother that lights up and twinkles based on whether the door is open or not and all of those kind of things. It's a prop that does something. That's also what I then got known for in theatre to an extent. So I had to make a colander that you could wear as a hat and would have a microphone pre-wired into the colander, but in a way you couldn't see it. So that you could bring a spectator up from the audience, put this colander on as a comedy hat, but it also mic'd them up at the same time. So like things like that is where I was the most keen to get involved.
Yeah. Wow. So many questions. So how did you, so you're working at this theatre in your 20s.
Mm-hmm.
you've finished university, or you're doing it parallel to university? Or
No, I did a few weeks of university and realized it wasn't really for me.
okay, fair enough. So how did you go from working at the theatre in Milton Keynes to doing what you do now, which is, forget about magic for a minute,
Yeah, sure.
which is obviously, you know, for those people that don't know, I mean, Drew works on, you know, so many different TV shows and films and productions, and people come to you. You don't go to them. It's not like you market yourself. You're the guy.
So there's sort of, I've got this career that's roughly 20 years, and it sort of splits into 4 equal quarters. So there's these 5-year chunks, and the first 5 years was very much all about technical theatre, all about theatre production, lighting, sound, video, props, set design, the whole, everything about it, and at a good level. And that was that first 5 years. During that, I was doing bits of magic. What I then got into was this period of time where I was getting more into the camera and photography and lighting side. And there was this trend about 15 years ago for using DSLRs to do video production. The Canon 5D Mark II came out, and it revolutionized really video production. And I jumped on that bandwagon. I thought it was a fascinating way of telling a story, yet another way that I hadn't explored. I was doing all this live theatre performance stuff, and I was really interested by video production. So I bought myself some kit, and I rang round, and I met loads of people. And I'm not too shy to introduce myself and sell myself a little bit and network. So I started ringing round, and I got a few clients, and I started doing this weird niche as a cameraman where I could fly anywhere in the world with one bag, which would have 2 cameras, a couple of microphones, a couple of tripods, all the stuff I need in one bag. And now I can do all of this work that you would previously have to send 3 people to. I can do on my own. And I was doing all sorts of documentary production work for the likes of Al Jazeera, for the United Nations, for World Bank, flying literally Africa, Asia, all over, doing a lot in Asia and a lot in Africa for about this 5-year period. And while I was doing that, I was meeting lots of TV production people. I was working with people that also work on EastEnders, and I made some stuff for them, and they'd ring me up and be like, "Oh, can you make that thing? You know how to do stuff." You know, that's what people, the number of times, like, "You're a clever chap, you must be able to work this out. We've got this problem. Do you know how to do it?" So I was doing little bits and pieces, and I came back, and I was sort of getting really the whole 5D Mark II boom was waning, right? Everyone was on that bandwagon at this point. The market was a bit saturated. There was less work. So I decided to set up a company, which I only ran for a little while, and then I closed it and sold it, which made curtains for theatres and cinemas and stages and cruise ships. But we also sold them to the likes of Pinewood and Elstree Studios, and a company called Millennium Studios, Elstree Light and Power, people like that are the fundamental TV production companies that exist, or film production companies that exist. And so I'm going in there with this knowledge that I learned in theatre of how drapes should work and how large curtains work. You know, to give an example, I made one curtain that weighed 8.5 tons.
Wow.
They're big. So I learned all of this engineering and problem solving of how you fundamentally make a curtain that large, where the seam at the top has to be so strong that its own weight doesn't rip the seams, and so on. So I had this period of my life where I was running this curtains company, but again, meeting all of these people, and they were coming to me for this solution problem solving, because I was also a cameraman. I also understood the theatre side. And because I had all of these different influences, it was all coming together, and I was getting this reputation, increasingly getting this reputation for being the person to go to solve a problem that other people didn't know how. And that's when I started doing a bit more of the film and the TV directly. You know, working on some great films and some incredible TV experience. And I had some wonderful experiences doing it. But I actually then sort of transitioned into the more recent 5-year chunk, almost by fluke, where I found this company that I've known for a long time. They were getting into this niche called experiential marketing. And experiential marketing fascinated me, and it used all of these facets because it uses theatre and production and storytelling, but it also uses prop design. It uses, we make stuff. It used all the production side. It used the camera work side, but it also harked back to all of the technical production stuff I knew about, like lighting and sound and video, how to edit video, how to pull a whole thing together for these really weird, wacky briefs. Like, here, we're Mini. We're going to give you 3 cars. Can you strip out all of the technology and turn it into a controller for GTA? Sure, we can do that. And that's the sort of stuff that we do. And that's the company I'm still at now. And we just get proper weird, wacky briefs like Adidas. We want you to build a wind tunnel on South Bank of London with a treadmill inside it so that people can carry a rugby ball and see if we can blow them over with the wind. And we'd like it filmed in slow motion so that we can send them a GIF of them falling over on this treadmill. Oh, and it's in 2 weeks. Sure, we can do that. And that's the stuff I do most of now, is this experiential marketing. And I love it because it is that you're giving a customer journey, a customer experience. It's storytelling. It's got to be engaging. And it uses all of those influences and the magic influences a lot, because it's about that journey and about that, it's that sense of wonder. You know, things like How to Train Your Dragon. For the final How to Train Your Dragon film, we created this pop-up studio that we built a few of and toured around the UK, but we actually toolkitted it so that other countries could do the same marketing, where we made dragons, life-size dragons, which I appreciate is a weird sentence. We made there was a debate about that. We made life-size dragons that you could go on with your kid, or, you know, if you're 8, 9, 10 years old, you just can ride the dragon yourself. And you're in this booth, and in front of you is this cloudscape, and you're flying through the clouds whilst you're riding a dragon. There's fans that come on at the right time. All the lighting is timed with the video that's in front of you, and you're just riding a dragon. But what there also is lots of hidden cameras that are filming you. So we can then edit that into a version of the trailer for the film starring you. And then we give that to you. That's free. And all of this is done to create buzz and to create social media content and all the rest of it. And it's just fun marketing. And that's way more fun to work on than the film itself. Way more fun to work on. And that's the stuff that I do now. And it brings all of that together.
Wow, that's incredible. But so wow, okay. So you got the coolest job in the world. So you do all of this experiential marketing for so many different clients. No two things are the same. But you were telling me off camera as well that a lot of the stuff that you do as well is so, for example, we're talking about the Netflix thing, Lost in Space. I don't know what. I'm being careful because I know that you've signed about 1,000 NDAs. Yeah. But there's certain stuff you can and you can't talk about. So I'm trying to navigate a river that I don't know, you know. How
no, that's fine. So yeah, some of the stuff is for use on set. That's becoming less and less common because we're focusing less on that work. The stuff I do freelance is sometimes TV and film, where someone will phone me up And we're like, oh, can you help design this thing or consult on this thing? That happens more often. Lost in Space is on the experiential side. So we built an experience based around the series when it launched. And it was quite cool. There's a scene in Lost in Space where Will Robertson claps and all of these flowers light up and this forest comes to life. And we rebuilt that forest basically in a hotel in Rome. So when you clap, all of this moss comes to life. And it was based on, there were microphones, we tracked where people were stood and where they were clapping, and it made it all happen. So we recreate essentially scenes from a show. But therefore, what we end up doing is working with the show creators and the technical team for that show on something like that project. As you say, a lot of the more recent film and TV stuff I can't really talk about. A lot of it's TV commercials as well. Like we've just shot some commercials for a very well-known brand. That was shot about a month ago, but they won't make the TV until about May. You know, there's stuff I could talk about, but it's very NDA'd, very NDA'd. I'm always amazed when I'm dealing with magic companies how I don't think I've ever signed an NDA with any magic supplier or any magic producer or any magician. And yeah, I probably sign an NDA every week of my working week, you know.
Well, let's briefly touch back onto the magic. So you've got this incredibly successful career where you're freelancing on various different TV shows and TV shoots, as well as working massively in demand on all these experiences. While you were building this aspect of your career, I know that you were bringing magic into what you're doing, but did you kind of step away from the day-to-day of the magic community? Because you said you were performing up until about the age of 20. When all of this kicked off, did you step away? And if so, what brought you back in?
Yeah, I did step away. So when I started, basically, I was a bit foolish and a bit gung-ho with going out and performing. And it's a mistake I won't make again. And it's a thing I will caution other magicians on freely, is make sure you're ready to do it. And I wasn't ready. I didn't have a broad enough repertoire. I hadn't considered all of the what ifs that you should think about of what to do if somebody grabs for that thing. And I didn't have the audience management skills to really do it. What I also am is an introverted person. And I was finding I was going out and gigging and I was drained. Just emotionally drained from doing it. I enjoyed it, but I couldn't then do it for another 5 days, which is never going to be a sustainable career. You can't, you know, that's not a way of earning money. So for that reason, I essentially stopped learning as much. Partly, I'm always someone that likes a challenge. And in some ways, I'd sort of gone, well, I've learned a bunch of things. I've learned all of this. I've learned all of this, and I've performed, and I've impressed some audiences. Box ticked. Next challenge, please. To an extent, right? And a combination of that and realizing that the performance, as much as it's fun, it's draining. Like on Christmas Day, I was performing, but after about 15 minutes with people that I didn't really know, I was drained, and I was like, and they were wanting to see more, and I had more on me. You know, I had plenty of things I could do that I could do comfortably, but I didn't do it because I was drained. So for mostly that reason and poor preparation, I stopped doing the gigging. I stopped going to Blackpool. I maybe would go to international maybe once a year, twice a year to say hi, but I wasn't going as regularly as I was. I would still perform. And then when I started traveling, I'd take some things with me. I wouldn't travel anywhere without a deck of bicycle cards. You know, I wouldn't. And I'd thumb tip and some basic bits and pieces and maybe a few coins and a shell. Or for a while, I was quite good friends with Eddie Gibson. So I would always have Chinese bit. I think it's one of the best coin tricks ever created, Chinese bit. So I would always have that on me. whilst I was traveling. So I'd be doing bits and pieces, but I certainly wouldn't be learning. So I've got this weird time window of complete and utter ignorance until I came back into it. Which again, it's like ebbs and flows. So every now and again, I'd be like, oh, I'll see what Alakazam have now, and look at the website and go, that's cool. I wonder how that works. And if I saw something I didn't know how it worked, I'd buy it. Because that's my mind. I'm very curious. I want to know how the thing works. So every now and again, I'd maybe do that and I'd place an order with Alakazam or Merchant of Magic or someone like that. But until recently, I hadn't heard of companies like Vanishing Ink because they didn't exist before, So I got back into it just before COVID. By chance, I was organizing stuff and I found a box of stuff in this office and I was like, oh, that's kind of fun. I'll play with that a little bit more. And it's probably the thing that changed, the thing that flipped the switch back to being really interested was the greater knowledge I have of the psychology, the greater knowledge I have of storytelling, of marketing, and how that influences, because that's just an experience. It's creating that sense of wonder, it's creating a sense of enjoyment for a spectator. It's no different, it's the same thing. And all of this stuff that I've learned suddenly started influencing the magic I was doing and looking at it in a different light. That's the difference. I was looking at this deck of cards not as a thing I could learn for me, it was a thing I could learn to share. And that's the difference. That's the thing that changed. And then obviously we kind of got into COVID, which meant two things. One, it was hard to go and see people, but it also meant I had all of this time or more time to do more learning. And I spent a bit more time on Alakazam's website. They were doing their lives more regularly than that whole concept to me was fairly alien. The magic community has changed a great deal, hugely. And people like yourselves, I was going on Magic TV and watching the reviews because that's sort of the same time you started doing Magic TV in the way you do now.
Yeah, it started just as lockdown started.
Exactly. So that coincided, and I was like, oh, this is a great way to learn and get back into the community and understand what I could be doing and what I could be learning. And I met, the few of the right people. Wayne Goodman helped me quite a lot. They, on the Alakazam Discord server, had some really good chats, some amazing lectures that were done on there. Tom Jester Styles did one on pendants, and that's spawned this whole avenue of a trick that will come out this year using a pendant, and that's where that came from, was that Discord lecture.
Wow.
And then, just getting back into it and putting my name out there a little bit and starting to do more and speak to more people and having all of these influences of other work, influences from people like Simon Sinek. And if there's any magicians out there that don't know who that is, pause this video and go and watch Simon Sinek, because every magician should be aware of his work on the psychology of why and the power of phrasing and so on. To me, he's more influential than any other magician I've ever spoken to. And he's not a magician.
Yeah.
But he's influenced me on storytelling more than anything else. And things like that, it all kind of came together as a bit of a jigsaw. And now I love the industry. I love the craft of magic. And I'm
Did you have any aspirations coming back into magic, or was it just a case of, hey, it's COVID's hit, I've got a little bit more time on my hands, I used to love this thing, I'm coming back just because because the reason I'm asking is because you've obviously become the go-to guy for a lot of companies in the industry if they need something done, and we can talk about that in a minute.
Sure.
When you came back, was it just for fun, or was it, hey, I've got a certain skill set that I think would be really beneficial within this industry?
No, it was pretty much just for the fun of it. I was trying to do something that was, I think one of the things you can always do creatively, if you need a creative boost, it's to do something else, right? It's always the thing that gets me most inspired is to do something different. And actually the magic was the different, right? So my work stopped over COVID. You can't do an event. You can't do person marketing events in lockdown. So all of that work pretty much paused. And so I needed a creative outlet. And then so that was the cause. The goal was never to start making my own things, or not to start making my own things. That's not true. To start selling my own things was never the goal. Making my own things for me was always in my mind. I've always thought for a long time, for the last probably 10 years, that 3D printing hasn't had a big enough influence on magic yet, that there's more to be done with a 3D printer and gimmicks. There's plenty of people that do stuff with 3D printers, obviously, but I don't think it's been explored enough yet. And I had that opinion 10 years ago, and I still have it now. So there's things I've wanted to make for me. I never set out to become a creator, if you like, because I don't really think that should ever be a goal, really, to be honest. I make the stuff because I think they're cool. If other people think they're cool, then great. And that came about because I shared an idea, this pendant-based routine. I shared that on a Zoom call with a few people. Wayne was one of the people on there, and he rang Peter Nardi up and said, "You've got to get on this Zoom call and see this thing that Drew's doing because it's cool." And that's how I met Peter. And he rang me the next day and said, "I've got this thing. It's really tricky. I've been let down by a couple of suppliers, and it's difficult to get made." And that was hard stretch.
Yeah, I remember before we got in touch with you, he was pulling his hair out, and he doesn't have much left. He was pulling his hair out because Roman came to him with this prototype, and he just couldn't find anyone who could do it. In fact, he went to places and they were laughing at him, saying, "No, that's not possible. What you're wanting is not possible.
Can't be done." Exactly. So that was how I met Peter. Was I showed him this thing that will be out in some guys at some point this year. It's changing quite how it works, but anyway, that's going to be out at some point. And he loved the idea. We spoke about it. He rang me the very next day and said, because it was at like 10 o'clock at night or something, and he'd got out of bed to jump on this Zoom call to see it because Wayne told him to. And he then rang me the next day and said, "I couldn't sleep for hours because I kept thinking of routines for this thing you showed." Like, because his brain was going with all the things that could be done with it. It was like, can you add this feature and this feature? Because if you can, then you could do this routine and you could use it for this thing. Because I'd created it as a mentalism prop to use with ESP cards or tarot cards. But obviously Peter wants to use it with a normal deck of cards. So he was like, can you do this and this and this? And his brain was going, and we just started jamming and started talking through all these ideas. And that's how our relationship started with Peter. I never set out to ring up someone and go, "I've got these ideas." It was almost the other way around. And now Peter and I speak occasionally, and there's probably 5 or 6 Alakazam projects on the go at any one time with me.
Yeah, and
some of which with your name on.
Yeah, well, you know, I mean, Alakazam and Peter Nardi are pretty much going to you for almost every product that comes out now. Passes through your office, doesn't it? Or a big percentage of it.
A lot certainly do. Peter's wonderful, absolute genius, utter genius. He doesn't have, within the Alakazam team, they don't have much technical skill in-house. So producing a drawing of how something should work to a Chinese supplier is difficult for them. So a lot of that stuff is coming through me. Even if I don't make it, there's stuff I can help with. So even if I'm not doing the making, he'll want my input on what kind of plastic to use. Where do we get these things made? Can you make these? And I go, I can't, but this company literally sells what you want. You know, just using that know-how of problem solving. And I know when it's right for me to be involved and when it's not. You know, if I'm adding value, I'm happy to add the value. When I'm not going to. I will just put them in touch with the right people. Yeah. And some stuff comes through here because I get involved in, you know, things like the packaging design comes through me sometimes now. You know, bits like that are happening with him. And the other side that is happening now is with people like Roman, and who's a creative genius. You know, I think Roman has an incredible mind. He's got something which I know you've seen, which I've been making the prototypes for, but I've been doing that for Roman, even though it will probably eventually be an Alakazam release.
Yeah. Because in the industry, a lot of the time, if you want to go to a company and create a trick and sell it through them, you have to give them a prototype first. It's just,
yeah. I think, to be honest, yes, you do have to. I agree. But I think just morally, it's wrong to take something to a company unless you've proven it. Like, I wouldn't dare go to a company with an idea or a fundamental concept unless I've proven that A, it's possible to make, and B, it gets reactions and makes sense to a spectator.
Well, you are right. There are times where that doesn't hold true. So, for example, I'm currently doing a gaff deck with Murphy's. Yeah. Myself and Lloyd Barnes are doing it together. We didn't have any clue what the gaff cards were going to be, but we just went to Murphy's and we were like, "Hey, would you like to do a gaff deck?" Me and Lloyd, and they were like, "If we had nothing to show them because we had nothing. There was nothing. It was just the idea of, would you like me and Lloyd Barnes to make a gaff deck?" And they were like, "Yeah, yep."
But that's the difference. They know who you and Lloyd are. And that is the difference. If you've got a proven track record of this incredible ability to take a thing and turn it into these 20, 30, 40 routines. And it doesn't matter what it is. I've got some gaff cards down here for a tarot deck that I'm working on. I could give you those gaff cards, which I've had printed because I had some cards left over when I was ordering. So I ordered some gaff cards for no particular routine, but I know when you get them in your hands, you will create something with them. And so I agree that that's different, but that's different because it's you, not because, and Lloyd, that's not true for anyone. For most of the people watching this, you've got to prove it, you've got to routine it, you've got to see if it works and make sense for spectators. The thing that annoys me the most is when magic comes out that doesn't make sense to an audience member. Because it's cool. It's when someone's thought of a method first and then routined it afterwards. Sometimes that works great, don't get me wrong. Lots of the stuff I release or work on is things where I come up with a method first. But most of the stuff that I think is good is where you come up with the effect first and the method after. And it's because it makes sense to the spectator. You know, all the concept of EDC, it works because it makes sense to a spectator. It's not stronger magic because the effect is better. It makes sense. The why, the reasoning for doing it makes more sense. Keymaster makes sense because you go, I've got a key, I'll do something with it.
Yeah.
That makes sense as a trick. There's a lot of stuff that comes out that doesn't have that logic. And that's the stuff I'm less interested in. And to me, that just shows it hasn't been performed in the real world.
Yeah.
Because I think it wouldn't hold up. And I have enough experience of gigging when I was younger that that sort of barrier is still there. I'm not necessarily performing as much now, but I know what will fly and what won't. And I've got enough audience management nous about me that I know what I can get away with and what I can't. And I will be pretty ballsy with some of the moves I do, you know, because you get away with it. And when you don't, you don't. But when you do, it kills. And I will be pretty lazy sometimes with the methodology because I don't think it matters. I will do crude palm and dump that in a pocket because it works.
Yeah.
Most of the time. And we're going off on many tangents here.
No, that's fine. I'm loving these tangents. Please go off.
Yeah, it's that. I just think for me, I was wanting to create stuff for me to perform that made sense for me, for my performing style, for my character, and wanting to do something a bit different and starting effect first, method second. You know, I know what I want the trick to look like before I know how it's going to work most of the time.
And that's very important. And on the flip side, I know I talked about the gaff deck, but you know, I mean, I've hired you to work on a couple of prototypes for me, purely because I can't think of anyone better to do that. And I know a lot of people in the industry, but for these two particular things, I'm like, man, if anybody can come up with the way of actually me wanting to do this, it's you, Drew. So I mean, if somebody's watching this and they want to work with you on an idea they've got to prototype it, can they do that? Because I found it very, A, answer that question, but B, I found it very interesting when we talked off camera about your 18 draw concept, because from a creative point of view, I thought that was amazing insight into your mind. And I know that you don't want to get too overloaded. So I think those two questions are tied together. How would people work with you? And can you talk to us about that process?
Sure. I'm always happy to talk to people. To be honest, the best way is Facebook. Facebook Messenger is the way I use the most. It's fairly easy to find me on Facebook. I'm one of only 3 Drew Perrys in the world. So if you search Drew Perry, you will find me. There's certainly not many that have this kind of hair that's this big. So it's normally easy to find me on Facebook. I'm at DP Magic Studio on Instagram, but I don't use it that much. So yeah, Facebook is the best way, or email or phone. And I'm always happy to chat. I have quite a lot of conversations where people will put me in touch with someone who's had this idea and they want to speak to me. And normally it's, sure, I don't have the time to work on it, but this is the thing you need to learn about. Look into this, maybe buy one of these and see if you can figure it out on your own. Because actually, if they can do it on their own and I have minimal involvement, they own more of the method. You know, I'm happy to talk for free. I don't like there to be a barrier to creating magic. I think it should be discussed and it should be as free as possible to talk about methods and magic, because it's, you know, I don't create stuff to try and make money. I make money with my job. Magic for me is about creating experiences for spectators. So if I can enable a magician who's got this trick that works for them, for their character, for their style, but they don't know how to make it, I'll help them make it. But I'd rather do that than make it myself.
And a perfect example of that, and I hope you don't mind me mentioning this, I bring it up because she brought it up in her interview and she brought your name up, Magic Mazing.
Yeah.
And her Ouija board routine, which
exactly
the house.
Yeah. That Ouija board, I'm thrilled to have been a part of that Ouija board. It's a wicked idea. It's Maisie's idea. And they showed it to me on a Zoom call and I loved it. I love the routine. I'm a big fan, you know this, I'm a big fan of the lie detector sort of plot, of the yes, no, the true, false. I use it in many of my routines, this concept, and I love it. So the idea of using that element of the Ouija board I thought was genius. The way they were doing it was really nice for the controls. I wanted to improve a couple of things and things that were harder for them to make. And I was more than happy to get involved. I think she's an incredible performer. And it was exactly that, where I was like, okay, I can help make this. And I don't think they'd mind me saying this. I haven't charged them a penny. I wanted to make it because it was worth making. And the cost to me to make something like that is very minimal, because I've got this workshop, I've got CNC abilities, I've got large format printing, I've got all of the materials in stock. So the cost to me to make that is fairly minimal. And to see where it goes, it needs some more iterations. I don't think she'd mind me saying that, that I think in 2 or 3 versions time, that could then be released as a product. And I do think that, but I don't think it's quite ready yet. It's on its journey. I'm a big believer in iteration. I think too many people think you go from idea or origination to final product, and it's so many steps in between, and to iterate, and it needs a bit more tweaking to be slightly more practical, slightly easier to set up without going into too much detail. There's a little bit of work, but it's a wicked routine. A pleasure to be a part of it. And I worked on the Ouija board side and the crystal pendant. There's one here. Both of those are, I mean, the crystal pendant is my idea, and the Ouija board is hers, but it felt like a nice way of tying it into this nice macabre routine. Yeah, and I do believe in that. It's on the point of iteration. It's something I've heard you say this phrase a few times, standing on the shoulder of giants, and I completely believe in that. And that's why I like learning so much, because you can learn that thing and go, oh, that will join the dot for this other routine that I've had. You know, I was watching a thing about PK rings, and I've got a PK ring, never use it. And it suddenly occurred to me that that was the answer to something else. And it's that iteration that I think is important. You know, people get very protective of, there's this perception, I think, where people are watching or on a website and they go, oh, so-and-so has already had that idea and they've done it. That doesn't mean it's finished. That doesn't mean you can't add something to it. That doesn't mean you can't add another phase to it. You know, and if everyone had that perception, nothing would get made. You know, but I think it's a really common perception out there that, oh, so-and-so's done that, because there's an element of not wanting to tread on people's toes. But if there's something that I've created and someone else develops it, I'm ecstatic. You know, I'm not going to be annoyed. I'm going to be ecstatic that someone thought it was worth looking at and improving. And if someone has an idea that I haven't, that's just good. That only does good for magic. So the more iteration that can exist, the better. Don't be afraid to play with something else. You know, you mentioned Charming Chinese Challenge. I love that coin routine, but that didn't stop Mario Lopez bringing out the challenge, you know, and that's his step. That's an iteration. That's a step forwards. And there will be another one and another one and another one. And that's how we get better. And that's a thing I'm really passionate in, especially creative iteration and technical iteration matters. You know, you don't get to a Chinese bit from Eddie Gibson just by going, I'm going to try making a shell. You know, it's so many steps in between, you know, and I know you know that, but it's a thing I'm keen to always share, that if you're interested in working with me, if you've got an idea you think I could help with, don't be surprised when I turn around and go, yes, these are your next 5 steps to work on. Go away and do that. You know, because, and you've seen me do that when we met in Newmarket. There was a super talented kid there, had some wicked ideas. And you and I were both like, you need to do this, you need to do this, you need to do this, try these things, try it the other way around. You know, there's no reason why you've done the card that way up, try it the other way up, try this, and try them out for yourself, because it's your thing. But those are my ideas. Those are the things to try. So I'm always happy to have that conversation with anybody. And I do get, you know, them on Facebook Messenger every now and again of, oh, so-and-so's put me in, said to talk to you, and this is my idea. More than happy to do that. But yeah, Facebook's probably the best way at the moment. I need to do better at that. I'm terrible at social media, terrible at marketing myself, and brilliant at marketing other people. Doing it myself is a totally different game.
It was the same way, isn't it? And can we talk about that draw system that you have?
Yes.
I get a question on my channel all the time about creativity and how to become more creative. And I have a creativity board, which I've spoken about on my channel before. I really found it fascinating when you told me about this system that you have with drawers. I think it's good.
So this is my home office that I'm in at the moment, and this is where most of the magic stuff I work on happens. I do some of it in my workshop, or it's not my workshop, the workshop I have access to. But down here, I've got 3 drawers with six drawer units with 6 drawers in each, so 18 drawers total. And every project I have on the go lives in a drawer. So, for example, that drawer is the pendant-based routine. All of the stuff is in there. There's various crystals, pendants, chains, bits of metal, bits of resin, bits of electronics are all in that drawer. And that's where that project lives. If I have an idea, I'll put a post-it note on the front of that drawer. And that's where that project has to live. And I will only have 18 drawers. That for me feels like the right number. It used to be 12 and I bought another one because I had too many ideas. What happens with a drawer when it doesn't get opened is the contents goes in the bin. So if there's a drawer with a project that I haven't touched for a year or so, I will be fairly ruthless and put it in the bin. There's a couple of projects that I'm that keen on that they stick around, but generally speaking, if I can't make that idea come into reality within a year, it's because it's not good enough. If I'm keen and passionate about it to get on with it, it will get done. So if it's not going to get done, it goes in the bin and it makes space for another project. And I use Apple Notes and I use something called Notion, and I keep a list of the various things kicking around and ideas that haven't even made it to a drawer yet. I was sharing one earlier about pirates and using fake doubloons. That hasn't made it to the drawers yet because the doubloons are still in my Amazon basket, you know. But literally before we did this chat, I was on Amazon looking at doubloons. I'm more than happy to share that idea because it's not mine, like the double cross thing. So super quick tangent. Double cross, I like it, but I don't really do it because I think it's a bit one hit and everyone does the same presentation. So I had this idea the other day because I met someone who was into the history of pirates and he had this replica doubloon. So I, not there and then, but that day performed double cross, but based on the X marks the spot. So I had an Old English penny in finger palm. Himber dropped the doubloon into this palm and then got him to hold on to it. So he was holding an English penny, but he thought it was a doubloon. Sorry, the other way around. He thought it was an Old English penny, but it was a doubloon. So I'm ahead there. And that's when I put the cross on his hand. Yeah. So he's now 2 steps ahead. He's got the cross and the gold doubloon. And I've still got another gold doubloon. So I then have that in my hand, do X marks the spot. I did the old thingy, I'm terrible at names, but you know the move I mean, that one. Banish that. And I do double cross weirdly. I have it with my hand up, so it's more of a visual vanish. I never understood the whole idea of doing it like this with it being as still as possible. To me, that's super visual where you can see it almost dissolving away. To reveal that I've got nothing in this hand because the X marks the spot and there isn't any treasure there. They turn their hand over, you've got the double cross, and they've got the gold doubloon in their hand.
That's great.
So I'm now working on a bigger routine based on piracy, especially because Theo 11 have a beautiful deck based on piracy as well, and pirates. Every Theo 11 deck is beautiful, but that one in particular I think is really nice. So that's just that's an idea of a sort of nugget of an idea. To me, that's not a routine yet. That's not a trick yet. That's not something that's mine yet. But that's an idea that might make it to a draw when I get some doubloons and play with different ideas got some ideas of maybe a card trick to do with it. So that will make it to a draw. But at the moment in the drawers are various things that I can't talk about as freely, but the crystal pendant that Maisie uses in her act, that's one of the drawers. And if you see me at Blackpool, say hi and I will more than happily show you some of the other stuff that I'm working on.
That's wow. I mean, do you find how do you balance your time between doing what you do? I don't want to call it a day job because there's nothing day about it, but between what you do within the magic industry and what you do in
what I'm salaried to do and what I'm not salaried to do. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah.
So the work I have, my salaried job, is quite flexible. I'm quite senior in the company, so I can make my own hours more or less. And it's a company that asks a lot of their employees, but gives a lot back. You know, it's intense for a few weeks, and then we'll be quiet for a few weeks, and no one cares if I use the workshop or the facilities there for something magic related, even if it's during the working day, that's fine. So the tricky bit isn't necessarily balancing the doing time, it's balancing the thinking time. Fundamentally, all of what I do is about thinking and thought process and coming up with solutions and designing stuff. Balancing that time is tricky against the work to an extent. The trickier bit is the work-life balance, because it's easy to go, right, I've got 2 days off from the job, so now I'm going to spend all day working in Fusion 3D coming up with this gimmick design so that I can print it, and then suddenly I've got no time out, I'm burning myself out, and that is tricky. The benefit really to the magic stuff is it rarely has a deadline. So it's unusual if I'm trying to rush something. You know, Hard Stretch had a very specific deadline and there were many hurdles along the way, so that one was tighter than others. But generally speaking, if a magic project has to wait, it has to wait, and that's okay. So that's not too difficult to balance. There are some deadlines. Obviously, Blackpool is coming out. Alakazam will have some releases at Blackpool. I am making some of those releases. So there's an element of that, but I'm just upfront about it. I know that my salaried job, my work is a quieter January, but a really busy February. So anything that I need to get ready for Blackpool, for me, has to be ready at the end of January, you know, to get done. But, you know, we're having this, it's currently nearly 2 a.m. I'm a night owl. I'm happy to come home from work, have some dinner, watch some TV, come to the office, spend a couple of hours designing something, and then go to bed and do it all again. You know, and it's the same thing. It's iteration. It's chip away at something. You know, I'm not really fearful of not knowing how to do something. A lot of people are fearful if they don't know something, they're fearful of it. And it doesn't matter what it is. If it's doing some tiling in the bathroom, I'm not fearful of knowing how to do it. If Bob can learn how to do that skill, I can learn how to do that skill. You know, and that's true for anything you see. You know, you watch some of the masters on Fool Us or anything like that, you can learn that. You know, you can learn those skills. It is possible for anyone to do those sleights that you watch Eric Chen doing. It's possible. Yeah. It's not easy, but it's possible. You know, and it's easier for some than it is others. But I'm a big believer in that anything can be learned and to not be fearful of that. So I'm always keen to I don't really perceive many barriers to doing something, which normally works in my favor. I mean, my partner always says that I don't believe in problems. And I don't generally, because I think there's a solution to everything. Not necessarily easy, but there is a solution to everything.
Yeah.
And that's just a sort of slightly stoic mindset. And even that, looping it right all the way back, some of that influence came from Darren Brown. because he uses a lot of Stoic mindsets and beliefs in his life. And that was one of the influences of me learning about that. But that was 15, 20 years ago.
Wow.
I had the pleasure of working with Darren quite early on, long before he was doing TV stuff. But he was starting to do some of the theatre shows. I think maybe he'd done a little bit of TV, but early days, I had the pleasure of working with Darren a little bit. And that had a big influence on me. Just spending an hour chatting with him in the bar had a huge influence on my approach and thinking.
Wow. Wow. So let me ask you one more question about this. Do you have any advice for anybody watching this that wants to be more creative, whether that be bringing a trick out to sell, whether that be creating something that's unique to their act? Because, and I've spoken about this on the channel before, I think that there's a lot of new people coming into magic right now. Lockdown was good for the industry. Lots of people found magic as a hobby and they've continued within the industry. But I think a lot of new people that are coming in, they see the pedestal that we put creators on, and they want to be a creator. And it's kind of a case of running before they can walk a lot of the time. And you know, it's like what you said earlier on. They want to release a trick. They don't want to put any effort into working out how it's going to work. They just want it to work. So if somebody's watching this that wants to be a creator of magic, as somebody who works with so many production companies and so many creators, as somebody who's creating their own magic and has worked with multiple artists, what advice would you give?
I think the two things I want to say on that, two fundamental points. One, if you want to be more creative, doesn't matter whether it's about magic or not, is have bad ideas. It sounds silly, but the more bad ideas you have, it leads to more good ideas. So do not be afraid to spend some energy and effort on something you think is a bad idea, because what it is yours and it's an idea. And if you can spend some energy on that, you will probably eventually dismiss it as a bad idea. You'll come up with 3 new ideas along the way. And for me, if I have an idea in my head, even if I think it's a kind of, there's something there, but it's probably not great, then I'll do it to get it out of my head. I showed you a thing a while ago with a jumbo coin routine and magnifying glasses and these big jumbo coins, like this big jumbo coins, right? That was something that's like, it's a bit of a brain fart. There's something there maybe, but it's not groundbreaking. But I had to do it to show myself that. But what it did was create these other 3, 4, 5 ideas. So don't be afraid of following through with bad or ideas that you don't have faith in. You know, they don't have to be a good idea. You don't have a fully formulated good idea. You learn, I think, to recognize a nugget, you know, and then that develops, and that's a skill that you learn. You recognize there's a little nugget of something that you think, there's something there, you know, there's something in this idea. And one of the things you were talking about, you told me it started as a little like, everyone does this, but I would like it to be slightly different. That's the nugget, right? That's the bit, and you go, okay, how? And you go, why? And that's where I would, again, point people at Simon Sinek. Start with the why. Think about the spectator's perspective, not yours. Don't necessarily think about the method. Think about, what would this look like to a spectator? What should it look like if it were real magic? Now, where do you make the compromises to make it possible? Because it probably isn't possible. The ideal effect probably isn't possible. So think through that, and then start to chip away at it, and don't be afraid to iterate. Don't be afraid to start with this loose nugget and kind of go, this is kind of, there's something there. Do it, progress, and you will find that you get better at recognizing when you have those nuggets. And take notes. I use an app called Notion. It's a fairly aggressive like project management tool and task management tool that I use because I have lots on and I think that way. even if you just use the Apple Notes app, jot everything down. I'm looking at my note here that's called Magic Ideas. I created it in 2017, and there are some ideas that I had in 2017 that are still there, but everything gets jotted down, even if it's just a nugget, even if it's like one of them here, I'll read it out. Rainbow Cascade needs reworking, should be re-released. It was really cool, right? Rainbow Cascade was a great trick.
Yeah.
It died with Davenport's, unfortunately, but it was wicked. And there was something about that ending that I loved. I don't know what it is, but I've noted that down. And I know at some point in the next year, 2 years, 3 years, I'll see something and go, aha, that's what I combine with that thing that I noted down. And now that's a more solid idea. So don't be afraid to do that. On the other thing I want to say on your point about putting creators on pedestals, to me, it's backwards. I don't put the creators on the pedestals. I put the performers on the pedestals. They're the people that have the skill. Having an idea and executing it is, to me, it's engineering. Anyone can do it. Anyone can learn how to do that. And that's great. And I love doing that. The people I put on the pedestals are the performers. And maybe that's a failing as a community, is that we don't do that enough. But to me, they're the people that just have that ability. And I've seen you perform, and I watched, not you, but I watched the audience, and everyone was just watching you. And you had a spectator up. They weren't watching the spectator. They were watching you, because you're a natural performer. And to me, that's why I hold you in high regard. You can create stuff, and you create some amazing things, but that's trumped by your performance skill.
Yeah.
All day long. You look at someone like Wayne Goodman, his performance ability is his greatest asset. He's a natural born performer, funny person, engaging, and that is a skill that can be learnt, because he teaches it on the Netrix, you know.
Yeah.
You know, and the things he says about that, that's the stuff that we should be putting on pedestals as a community, above and beyond creators. The people I want to see in lectures, if I go to a convention, are the performers, talking about how they routine stuff, how they script things, how they combine those ideas, and how they create that sense of wonder on stage, and the pacing and the light and dark, and how you do all of that. That's the thing that I think is the skill. You know, you look at Ryland. Ryland is the same. He's got that ability to perform that's come through years of flight time and hard work. But that's the thing that I hold in higher regard than going, oh, if I do a double lift after doing that, it creates this thing. That's less impressive to me than watching someone perform. And yeah. I don't know what as a community we can do to rectify that, because I don't, you know, that's what people should be working on. If you're new to magic, if you've started in the last couple of years, the performance style, how you make a trick yours, is far more important. The only reason you say I do Charming Chinese Challenge so well is because I've taken it and I've made it mine.
Yeah.
And I do it in a different way. The trick is the same. It's not that I do it better than Troy. I don't agree with you. I do it the way it suits me.
Yeah.
He does it the way it suits him. That skill isn't talked about enough, and I don't know how to do that better, but I'd love to explore that more.
I completely agree with you, 100%. Like you are singing from the exact same hymn sheet that I sing from. This is, yeah, completely agree.
And that there has to be a way of rectifying that. I just don't know what it is, because obviously all of the magic shops and the sites, they make money by making a big deal out of the creators, obviously, because that's why you go and buy the Danny D. Ortiz routine, because it fooled everyone on Flawless. That's why you go and buy the challenge by Mario Lopez, because everything he does is just beautiful, you know. And that's what I look for when I'm watching releases, is something I can learn from and do something with and turn it into my own. I'm not Mario Lopez. I'm not going to perform that the way he does. I'm not going to act surprised when the coin falls off the ribbon like he does. I'm not going to start doing cat impressions like Danny D'Ortiz, you know, because that wouldn't suit me. And I think if anyone is new to this and they're learning stuff, when you learn a trick, really think through how you're going to present it. You know, I gave you the example about double cross. That to me is a little twist, but it makes it more mine. And I've not seen any other people do double cross that like that. And it's so easy to be a parrot. You watch a trick, especially if it's someone like Danny D'Ortiz, where your jaw is on the floor the entire time. You get tunnel vision that trick has to be done that way. And it's the same with something like double cross. You get tunnel vision that that's how you do it. You talk about it being like a stage trick and that there's a stick man and it's, sorry, I can't draw very well. And it's the same, and you just get cookie cutter magicians. You know, you turn this handle and out pops a wedding magician in the same suit doing the same 12 tricks. And there's nothing wrong with that, but that person isn't who I'm putting on a pedestal. The people I admire are the people that can perform. And that's actually, going back to Roman, that's his greatest strength. He's got that persona on stage, that energy on stage that's captivating, and he knows what he's doing. He, again, has done some theatre work. I know he's done some theatre stuff. So his ability to pace and perform is just evident when he's on stage, you know, and you can see it in buckets that that's something he's worked on and read about and learnt about. But it's learnt from theatre, not from magicians.
Yeah. And the best performers, you go back to performing, the best performers are people that have gone out and got themselves some experience somewhere else. Like you talk about Roman, you know, he has a degree, literally a degree in performing arts, and has, you know, performed in theatres his entire life. You see other, I've seen magicians that have taken acting lessons and vocal coaching lessons and so on and so forth.
Well, you look at ITV's Greatest Magician, the Witch. I don't know who it is. It's an actor. I can tell you that now. They are an actor first, magic second. The magic is a vehicle for telling a story. Doesn't matter if that story is just simply, do you want to see a cool card trick? That's still a story. And that magic is just a vehicle for telling that story. Storytelling is our art. Magic is just a vehicle. And I say just in the nicest way. I have the highest regard for the art form, but it is just a vehicle for telling a story. And you need to have something to say.
Yeah.
You find that voice, and that's so much easier said than done. But you've got to find that voice and find that thing that not makes you different, but makes you you. You're you. So what do you find interesting? You know, I'm interested in occult things, so I have a tarot deck that I'm working on, you know, because that interests me. And when I perform it, I don't do a tarot reading because I overtly say that that's not something I believe to be possible, but I still find them interesting objects. And that's a presentation that suits me. I'm not a mentalist. I don't have the character or the persona to do that.
Yeah.
I know what suits me. And that's a really hard skill to learn, because I think that's what puts a lot of magicians off magic, is they buy a trick they think looks cool. They don't realize it doesn't suit them.
It's so true. Tom Crosby talked about this on an interview I did with him a couple of years ago now. He says that, you know, he can walk around a dealer hall now and hardly spend anything, because even if it's the best trick in the world, he just knows it's not going to fit his character of the performing nerd.
Exactly.
You know?
And it doesn't matter who you are, that is going to be true. Even if you're a hobbyist and you don't perform gigs, you're going to perform, you're still going to be interested in something. So this maybe is going to sound harsh, but I think if you have a thing that's sat in a drawer, and everyone's guilty of this, of buying something out of curiosity, secret hunting, there's nothing wrong with that. But if you've got something that's just sat in a drawer, that's on you. That's not on the magic shop. That is on you, on buying the right things that suit you. And that's not talked about enough. I don't perform that much. I buy things because they interested me. I just showed you, I've got the challenge, Mario Lopez, because that's a coin trick I'm passionate about. I wanted to learn his take on it. As a magician I respect. Sometimes I buy stuff just to support that person because I think what they're doing is really cool. And I want to maybe play around with that idea. Half the time I buy something, it's to see whether it fits me, see whether I can learn something from that and apply it to this other thing. That's not talked about enough, I don't think. But learning what you want to get out of magic, what story you want to tell, then think about how you tell it and what tricks you're going to use along the way to tell that story. That's the right approach. And look at what performers you like. Watch YouTube, watch Britain's Got Talent, whatever, fool us, and look at the performances. Don't look at the tricks.
Yeah.
Look at the performances and how they're engaging people, how they're bringing up spectators. There's 1,000 different ways to bring up a spectator from an audience, some of which have a method behind them and most of them don't. And that looking at what will fit you matters. Even if you're just doing a card trick in the pub, knowing what works and what doesn't work in that environment and for you matters. And that, if you're new to this and you want to create something, do that first, because as soon as you start doing that, you encounter problems. You go, okay, I've got A and I've got to get to B. I know how to do this bit because I'm going to use Crazy Man's handcuffs, and I want to get to this part. How do I get from there to there? And that's when you suddenly go, oh, I've just created something. You created something because you had a problem, because you were trying to perform something that suited you. And that's where my ideas come from. I go, right, I want to perform something using ESP cards. Okay, what are the coolest ESP cards on the market? Eclipse, 1914. Everything D. Christopher does is at least good, if not excellent, right? So they're the first ESP cards I'm going to buy. They're great. I use them all the time. I use them with my crystals and so on. But that's step one is, right, now what do I do? How do I get from there to there? Okay, I probably need some clever envelopes. Now I'm going to buy some clever envelopes. And it's like, okay, well, that kind of worked with this off-the-shelf product. How do I do that differently or better? And that's where creativity for me comes from. And then just making sure you know everything, think about why, think about the spectator's perspective, and think about the story that you want to tell. The crystals is a story. I talk about energy and atmosphere and ambience, and it's a whole, there's 3 minutes of talking before I do an effect, because it's all about explaining and setting the scene. And then it's magic, 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 but they make sense and it all builds up to this final reveal.
Yeah.
But it was story first, which effects fit it second. And I think that kind of is my main points on that, really.
That's a good point. That's amazing. It really is. This has been so good. This interview has been so good. So I want to ask you one last question. What have you got planned coming forward? I mean, is there anything left? Like, what have you got left in your magical bucket list? I mean, you've only been back in the industry since the beginning of lockdown. So it's really just been for about 2 years. What are you wanting to achieve within the magic industry, both as a creator and, you know, do you have any aspirations to perform or anything like that again, or is that ship sailed? And is there anything you'd like to achieve, you know, in your salaried job that you haven't achieved yet? Like, I can tell you're very goal driven. Or at least I think
I'm quite goal driven, and I do set fairly ambitious goals, but to me the goal is to learn more. Like, fundamentally, that's what I want to do. I've spoken to you enough times. You're like a walking encyclopedia. I spend time with people like you, Wayne and Peter. They're all just encyclopedias, you know. So to me, I'm like not even 5%, not even 10% of learned as I want to be. You know, there's so much I want to learn. You know, buying more magic books than anything else these days, and not having the time to read them, but at least they're on the shelf. I want to release some things. I think there's some things I can contribute to, and that's how I see it. It's a contribution to the art that I care about. The crystals will be out in some guise this year, and check out some of Maisie's performances to see it. I've not released any videos yet of what that is or what it looks like, because it's still in development, but that will be out this year. My tarot cards will be out this year. And another thing that you know a little bit about, which is a wicked little utility that I'm super proud of, that I think will, to me, it's utility. So I'm looking forward to seeing what other people do with it. You know, it's a gimmick that I've never seen anything quite like it before. The people I've shown it to has never seen anything like it before. And it's super powerful. And it's one of those where I don't want people to do the routine that I do with it. I want people to take it and combine it with that other thing and that other thing, or, you know, it's a card trick, so you combine it with quantum deck, you know, you combine it with something else.
Yeah, I mean, you gave me an early prototype, and honestly, I can tell you, as the creator of quantum deck, it takes quantum deck to an entirely other level.
It's killer. I do it with quantum deck, and it floors people. You know, it's a great utility, and the one that you've got is probably, I think, going back to iteration, I think yours is version 7. And the one here, there you go, brief flash, is, I think, version 11. You know, it's bumped on along, and I think that one is the final version. I think that is it. So now I'm into routining, getting that routining right. I've got a wicked idea for a main routine, quote unquote, that's a backwards card trick that's coming along really well. So there's those that I want to do. I want to release those. I want to contribute to those. I want to help other people like Maisie. You know, watching performers, the people I put on a pedestal, and helping them is the thing that I like doing. That's what I enjoy doing. That's where I think I add most value. I don't think I add that much value to the community as a performer. I'm not bad at it, but I'm not excellent. And I know that, you know. I'm comfortable performing, and I've come up with ideas based on what I perform, but it's not my skill set. My skill set is solutioning, and that's what I love doing. So I'd like to do more of that. I'd like to work with some more people. I think any magician would be lying if they said they didn't have an idea of what they would do if they were on Fool Us. And I have an idea of what I would do if I was on Fool Us. It's something that's pretty well guarded. I've only shown a handful of people ever, and it's a trick I've been working on for nearly a decade. And it's wicked. I'm super proud of it. It's one of those things that I'd like to... It's an
the one you told me about off camera beforehand.
Yeah.
It's just ridiculous.
What it requires is quite a lot of capital. There's a couple of those ideas I've got where I've got another idea for a wicked card trick, but it requires like 2 or 3 grand of capital spend just to find out if it works. And it might not. So there's a few of those, and this is one of them where the prototypes are possible, and I've made elements of it. I'm yet to make a fully finished thing, but I know that's what I want to do. I want to take some of this income that I'm earning by doing these releases, not to make money, but to enable me to make more cooler things that require that capital, that require those more complicated procedures to make, that are a bit more electronics. You know, we didn't really touch on electronics, but a lot of what I do involves custom electronics and custom things that do stuff. So there'll be more electronics based things that I do, maybe some software based things, not apps per se, but yeah, software based tricks. So yeah, there's more of that. I'd love to do something like Flawless. I don't think I'm there yet, but it's that to me is an aspiration of, you know, there's not many performers I hold in higher regard than Penn and Teller. You know, to me, they're the heroes. So doing something in front of them would be an absolute honor. I'm also currently in process of joining the Magic Circle. I'm an apprentice now, so I'm working on that. I will almost certainly do my next iteration of my Charming Chinese Challenge as my exam piece, which is really wicked. Is a fundamental little simple idea that I had that takes no more effort, but you've seen how I do it with a spectator either side of me. With the ribbon wrapped around the fist, I get them to hold one end of the ribbon each and then let go. And the ribbon is then just hanging there in free space because they're holding it.
Wow.
Takes no more effort as a magician, but I've never seen anyone do that. Everyone does it the way Troy Hooser does it, which is great. I do it that way. You know, it's killer. I'm not taken away from that. But you've got two spectators that for that third phase don't do a lot. So I wanted to bring them back in on that third phase. You've got this thing where you've got the ribbon around your fist. They take the ends of the ribbon. All you do is let go, and you've got this beautiful moment where there's nothing in your hand. The ribbon's hanging there, and that's what they're focused on. So they absolutely don't see the stack of 3 coins on the table.
Yeah.
It, to me, is a routining thing, as the psychology of it is way better. So I'll probably do that. So the Magic Circle is a big part of 2023 for me, for sure. And that's something I've always wanted to do. That's been on my bucket list since I was 12 years old. You know?
That's awesome. Awesome.
And yeah, just learning more and talking to more magicians. I love it. I love talking to magicians. I love going to the conventions and just talking to people and jamming and going, oh, have you seen that OTT by Louis Laval? How cool is that? Couldn't that be used for this card trick? And, you know, that proper sessioning is just the best fun.
It really is. It really, really is. It really, really is.
And I guess the only other thing to say is I do think 3D printing, we've barely seen what it can do for magic as a method of making something. We've not seen the start of what 3D printing can do in magic yet. I do believe that. I've been using my work for over a decade, and the stuff we could be doing is so much more.
I was speaking to Dave Bonsall from Prop Dog about this, and he gets very annoyed with 3D printing. He says that he sees tricks come out and they're 3D printed in mass.
Yeah.
And his attitude is 3D printing should be a prototyping tool only. And then when you get to a point where it's prototyped and it's ready to go, then you go from 3D printing to injection molding or whatever. Do you agree, or do you think that 3D printing is going to get to a point where it is robust enough to be the method used to create the final product?
I think it's totally robust enough. Totally robust enough. 3D printing is tricky. There's a perception that you buy a 3D printer, you design your thing, and you send it to it, and it's done. It's not true at all. You know, that's like saying painting is easy because I've bought a canvas and I've bought some oil paints. It's the step one. Designing something to be 3D printed is a whole niche in and of itself. If you take a design that's right for injection molding and you try and 3D print it, it probably won't be very successful. Depends on the gimmick. You take something like level 1, that could be totally 3D printed en masse, not a problem. 3D printing has lots of subsets. So what most people think of as 3D printing is called FDM, fluid deposition modeling, where you essentially take molten plastic and you squirt it out onto a plate. That's what I have over there, is my 3D printers or FDM printers. And they absolutely have constraints and weaknesses and problems in mass production. And I have seen products out there that have been made that way, and they shouldn't have been. It's not the right tool for every job. There are other 3D printing methodologies, things like SLS and MJF and resin printing, that absolutely could be the final product. And it just depends on how much you're making. If you're trying to make 2,000 of a thing that's a small plastic thing, it's going to be cheaper and better to be injection molded. But if you want to make something for you to do a thing, an FDM 3D printer or a resin printer can absolutely do that thing. You know, if I want to make a one-off gold pirate doubloon for my double cross trick, I absolutely could 3D print that and spray it gold and do it. Yeah. That doesn't stop me doing that. And that's what I mean. I don't necessarily approach it as a mass production tool. So is that a prototyping tool if you're the one doing it and performing it every night? To me, that's not prototyping. That's making something bespoke that's for you. And I don't think we do that enough. And one of my things is 3D printed. It will be 3D printed. It's FDM printed, and there is no reason to make it any other way. You just have to work within the constraints of what is and isn't possible with that technology. And that's difficult. There's a whole set of engineering skills that people have careers just in that, I'm not saying that's trivial or easy, but it does depend.
Yeah.
I've got other things which are 3D printed purely for prototyping, and it's a fantastic tool for that. But I forget the name of the trick. You did it on the review show where you build a Lego person with 3 flips, and I think Ryland does it with a t-shirt of the Lego.
Yeah, he does that in his show, Sketching Svengali by Mark Shaw.
So Wayne Goodman does that. He loves that trick. I love it. It's a great idea. One of the things he wants to buy a 3D printer for, and he was asking me about this the other day, is so that he can 3D print, a giant Lego man that looks like the one you force in Sketching Svengali.
Ryland was asking that just last week. He was like, can we get a big Lego man? I'm like, dude, I have no idea.
Yeah. 3D print them.
He wants to, if you remember his BGT act, he walks up on stage after doing Venom Cube, and he puts the 2 cubes in the box, and he says, with Lego, you can create anything with your imagination. And he opens up the box, and he's got the Lego teleportation device that he uses for. He wants to use that same prop, because we've got the prop. He wants to use that same prop to make a Lego Ryland.
Yeah.
So he wants to make a Lego Ryland out of the 2 Rubik's Cubes. Then he wants to put the Lego Ryland into a box and turn it into the thing that's used.
So, to me, that's a perfect 3D printing example. It's not a tactile thing that the spectators are going to hold. It's a prop that needs to look right.
Yeah.
And the cost to make that in injection molding would be absurd, or blow molding, or any other manufacturing process would be ridiculous. To make that out of 3D print would cost me a tenner. And that's the truth of it. The plastic is cheap. Once you've got the thing, they're down here. There's a drum of neon orange plastic. That's 15 quid and is a kilo of plastic. It's cheap. Yes, you then got to either paint it or do decals. But I've also got large format vinyl printing. So I can do those decals and I can make those things relatively cheaply. There's a learning curve to that, but I think that's not explored enough by magicians. And to me, that's a wicked reveal. If you can have a Lego man that's a foot tall, under a cloth or something, that's a real double wow, because it's like a jumbo coin. People haven't seen that before. It's a double hit at that point. And if you like Lego, that would be a really cool surprise reveal. And I hope Wayne doesn't mind me sharing that, and hopefully he won't. I don't think but that's printable. And that's that's not about prototyping, or that's a perfectly valid final way to build something.
Yes, it is.
But I do get what Dave means. I think what he's getting at is that FDM is overused. I agree with that. But SLS is cheap. You can't buy the printers to do SLS printing, but it's not difficult to go to suppliers like 3D Print UK, where you can upload your design. They'll SLS print it to you in the color that you want, polished or matte or whatever finish you want it in, and send it to you a week later for not that much money. You know, so if you want something bespoke, even not owning the printer isn't a problem. You can just design a thing. I say just, but you can download these files. So if you want to make a large Lego man, you can go to websites like Thingiverse, Cults, download the model of the Lego man, upload it to 3D Print UK in the color that you want, and click buy. And it comes in the post a week later. That's still a 3D printed prop for a magician. You know, so I think that's ill-explored, and that is one of the things I want to look at more. You know, I want to one day release a thing where people can buy it from whatever shop, whether it be Alakazam or elsewhere, or they could buy the files to print it themselves. I'd love to see that happen one day.
We are moving in that direction. 3D printers are becoming more and more popular than ever before.
And you don't blink an eye when you see a download that tells you to get your craft knife out and a couple of cards and make a gimmick.
Yeah.
You know, and we are at the point where even if you don't have a 3D, if you're watching this and you don't have a 3D printer, you probably know someone that does. We are in that environment now. If you're watching this as a kid, you've probably got access to one at school. Most schools have got one or two now. And if you can use it, it's just such a wicked tool. It really is. And there's so many things you can do with it that it just opens up so many ways of really customizing something to you. That to me is the biggest skill, bigger benefit. Not, you know, Dave's approaching that probably as a shop of, I need to make 500 of these things. It's a crap way of going about making 500 of a thing. But it is a great way of making something for you.
Yeah. That makes total sense. 100% total sense. That's incredible. Yeah, that's incredible. This has been genuinely, like, I interview a lot of people. I'm on over 200 now. This has been one of my favorites, Drew. I love it when I interview people that my audience probably haven't heard of before, and kind of let them know about somebody who they should be aware of, and that encapsulates you perfectly. People should be aware of you. Anybody who wants to make their act unique should be reaching out to you. Anybody who wants to create their own magic should be reaching out to you. Hell, producers should be reaching out to you. And I know that you're going to be exploding onto the scene in 2023. And you, as I said right at the very beginning of the interview, you're going to be going kind of in front of the curtain as opposed to being behind the curtain. And I can't wait to see what people think of all of the stuff that you've got coming out, because you are very, very clever. You really are. And as I say, we're working together on a couple of things, and I'm very, very excited about it. So,
yeah, I'm really excited by some of the stuff that I've got going on. I wish I could talk about the specific projects more, but you know, that's the nature of what we do. So yeah, it is exciting. I'm looking forward to this year to see where it goes.
Well, here's a question very quickly as we wrap this up. Where can people reach out to you? You've said several times,
yeah.
Hey, what's the best way to reach out to you, Drew?
Facebook is the best way. Add me on Facebook or just drop me a message on Facebook Messenger. I'm at DrewLX is my name on there. So search that and you can add me on Messenger. I also use Telegram at DP Magic Studio. Instagram is at DP Magic Studio. Any of those is a great way to start. And I'll always just give you my number and we'll jump on a call or jump on a Zoom call and chat. Doesn't matter who you are, just send me a message.
Perfect. That's brilliant. Drew, thank you so much for jumping on the channel. I can't wait to see everything you've got coming out. And I've said this before, I'll say it again. If I can ever help you in any way, please just say so, because more people need to know about you. And I want everybody that's watching this to leave a comment down below and let Drew know what you thought of the interview. I've had an absolutely amazing time. I've known you a little while now, and there's a lot in this interview that I didn't even know or wasn't even aware of. So
I look forward to reading the comments, and I want to say it again, I alluded to it, but I do want to thank you directly. Magic TV is what got me back into doing this. And I know other people where that's the case. Like that, it was watching that and going on Alakazam and reading what you were saying and what you were saying on Magic TV is one of the things that got me back. And that's just directly thank you for that, because Magic TV is wicked.
It really does, because it's a lot of hard work. It's a lot of hard work.
I know how hard you work on it, and it's easy to not consider that. I know how busy you are and what else you could be doing. So the fact that you make the time to do it, and it's great to watch. It's great to watch you and Ryland. I'm loving the matchumentary. So just, I just wanted to directly say thanks, because it does mean a lot. This community is what I care about, and I know you care about it, and it's a great way that you put back.
Absolutely. Man, thank you so much. It means the world. It really does. Thank you. Genuinely. Thank you so much. And I can't wait to see what you got coming up this year, Drew. You're going to be at Blackpool. Yeah, you're going to be at Blackpool. People want to come over to you at Blackpool and say hi.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
I'll be at Blackpool. We're wearing a Magic Podcast pin badge when they get out. And
absolutely, we've got them all being printed and ready to go. They're going to be amazing.
I can't make it to the pre-meet on the Wednesday, but I'll be there Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. So just come say hello.
Just come find me and we'll give you a pin badge.
Yeah,
and
nice one.
And yeah, I'll be there doing very little. I've got for the first time ever, I've got nothing on. No performing or lecturing or anything. I'm just going to be hanging out. So
yeah, that'd be good. It's the right way to do it. It's great fun. Like the Newmarket meet was awesome, just proper sessioning with everyone of all skill levels, And if you want to, I know you've talked about it on the podcast a little bit, but I haven't heard you say it on Magic TV very much. If you're going to be at Blackpool for your first time or second time, show someone what you're doing. Doesn't matter what it is. If you know they've seen it before, B-Wave is one of those things I've done 1,000 times, but if you show me your handling of B-Wave, I'll be thrilled. Don't be afraid to just show people things when you're at a convention, because I think this year at Blackpool there'll be a lot of first timers.
Yeah, there will be. This is the first big Blackpool back after COVID, and there's so many new people in Magic. So many people I'm hearing going, oh,
and that keeps going. You look at ITV doing a Magic special, they wouldn't do that if that wasn't the growing interest. The fact that it's continuing to grow is just amazing.
Absolutely. Magic's in a good place.
It definitely is. It definitely is. We just need to idolize the performers.
Absolutely. Well, let's see if we can make that happen. And Drew, one more time, thank you very much. I really appreciate you coming on Magic TV. Leave a comment down below, guys. Hit Drew up on Facebook and Instagram and all that fun stuff. And you know what? I'll be back again tomorrow with another video. So watch out for that. But one more time, Drew, thank you so much.
Thank you.